Oh, hey everybody, it's the Commodore from the Clan of the Grey Wolf, and you are watching the weekly Wringer series here on clanofthegreywolf.com. Now, as you can see, I'm not in my normal digs back at the old homestead. Actually, you've caught me on vacation. It's actually one of the reasons why last week's video got posted so late, and why this video is being shot with the brand new Clan of the Grey Wolf flip video camera rather than my handy-dandy computer webcam. Anyway, so I hope you don't mind the digs, but we will go on, power on as usual. Many of you made a comment last week, and I wanted to say thanks about this. You know, it does take a little bit of effort to get this video series running and to keep it going, you know, week after week, and I'm sure you guys know what that's all like. So, you know, even though I'm on vacation, shooting the video anyway because I care about the community and I want it to keep going. So I certainly appreciate when you guys, you know, wish me well for those kinds of things, because it certainly does help. Knowing that you guys enjoy it and that it's a part of your week makes me want to keep doing it. So that is the most sincere sentiments from the Commodore right off the bat. So that being said, kind of powered on. We've got the bar scene here, you know. Picture yourself with a drink in your hand and make yourself comfortable. We'll be here for a little while to talk about things like we normally do here on the Weekly Wringer. So, a couple of things we have to talk about today. One, wrapping up the conversation from last week. That's what we've got to do first. I've got some of my favorites written down right here for the contributions from the community about the gadget from, your favorite gadget from a sci-fi movie. I will, of course, give you my own thoughts about that, as I always do. And then we'll move on to a question for next week about price drops that I think you'll all really enjoy. So, you know, and as long as the bar theme doesn't get to you, I hope you can stay with us all the way to the very end. All right, so as you recall last week, I asked you about what your favorite gadget from a sci-fi movie would be. So if you could have it, you know, just one gadget that could be yours that you could use, which one would you pick and why? A lot of great responses, all of which I think I probably figured on, save for maybe a few, and I'm gonna touch on that as we move on through the video today. Let me just get right to a few of them I thought were really, really good. Mr. K talked about the replicator and the universal translator from Star Trek. Two of probably, I would say, the best gadgets, geek gadgets from Star Trek. I can't argue with the replicator. I think it's a great thing, although, you know, probably would be, I would consider that something a little more than a gadget. And one of the things I was going to talk about was Zoc actually mentioned that his interpretation was more along the lines that it was something more handheld, something more portable. I get that. I think that's a good idea. I think that's generally good sentiment. You're definitely not going to walk around with a handheld replicator, just like you can't walk around with a 3D printer right now. So I think that's good, but that being said, I didn't stipulate, so Mr. K thought the replicator was a great idea. Obviously, being able to walk around and replicate food at any time, you know, I mean, generate a bunch of tacos for an African village if you want to. Whatever you like. I don't know why you would replicate tacos for an African village, but, you know, that was just the first thing that popped in my mind. The universal translator, I think that's a great idea. Obviously, having something you can kind of like stick in your ear and anybody says something and it automatically just comes to you in your native language. That's a great concept. I do appreciate several of you talking about the idea that a lot of these things have come to fruition in terms of phone apps. But I think Mr. K answered that very appropriately with the idea that you know, there has been no universal translator created. And one of the things, if you ever watch some of the Star Trek moments where the universal translator is used, it gets a lot of idiomatic phrases that normally would never be, I guess, translatable on the fly by someone that just knew all the words of a language or had all the kind of lexicon available. So, you know, if somebody uses a figure of speech in Klingon, right, you're going to understand what it means. So if we had a universal translator here, obviously we wouldn't be probably translating Klingon, although it is taught in colleges now. So, you know, maybe there is some justification for a Klingon universal translator. But that being said, I would probably go for something, you know, I mean, if you're going to go to a foreign country, What a great thing to be able to have. You walk up to a counter and you're just trying to order something, and they keep talking to you about options, and you have no idea what they're saying, and it just would make things a lot easier. I think that would definitely make life a lot better for folks going over in foreign travel. Unless you think not being able to understand the language is a good thing, which I do not. So I mentioned Zoc talked about the idea of having the gadget be a handheld device. I think I probably agree with that. I think that's probably more along the lines of what I was thinking. That being said, I didn't stipulate, but I also wanted to say that he had mentioned the lightsaber, which is probably the easiest. Honestly, it's the first thing that I thought of when I was coming up with this question. You know, some people say that you can solve all your problems with a big hammer. I happen to think you can probably solve all your problems with a lightsaber. Just me, just throwing it out there. You know, lots of problems could get solved with a lightsaber. You know, are you going to need to slice your way into a tauntaun to, you know, survive the freezing cold of Hoth anytime soon? Probably not. But, you know, there are plenty of things you could do, despite, or I guess, instead of just killing people. I mean, that's one cool thing about it, but there's a lot more to do with a lightsaber, obviously. You'd never need any Rambo knives with a lightsaber, and I think we all know that. All right, now let's moving right along. Let's see. Mr. Kettleman talked about the hoverboard from Back to Future 2. Man, this one, there were a lot of Back to the Future mentions, but this one really got me going. I thought, and Mr. Kettleman talked about a couple different applications, so I won't go back over it, but I thought, man, that would be one of the most useful and fun devices to have if you're just being purely selfish, right? The hoverboard is damn near the top, if not the top. So I got to give major props there. But also, you know, first of all, if we're not talking about handheld, the actual car, the DMC-12 that he actually uses to travel through time, that's right up there for me. I'd love to have that one. You know, cruising around town back in time with a DMC-12, that's not bad. But also I think it was called Mr. Fusion, or the maybe it wasn't called Mr. Fusion. Maybe that's just me. But it was something that basically you just fed all your garbage into the back of it, and that's how the car was powered in Back to the Future 2. Or actually that started in the original Back to the Future, but you get what I'm saying. So that was a really cool idea. Who would want to turn garbage into power? I think that's a great concept and a good way to be able to do it with a handy-dandy Mr. Fusion. The Beer Ninja talked about the underwater breather apparatus from the Star Wars prequels. I'm glad somebody got the Star Wars prequel movies in there somehow. I'm glad that now we've touched on Star Trek and Star Wars. And if I were going to go with a gadget from the Star Wars prequels, obviously taking the lightsaber out of it, I would say that little thing that like Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon put in their mouths and dive into the swamp with and are able to breathe is pretty cool. I have no idea how it would work, and I'm sure someone's written a technical manual about it that I'm horribly disinterested in. But if I were interested, I'm sure it would be out there, and I'm sure it would be a cool thing to have because, you know, think of all the applications you could use that for. Go discover the lost city of Atlantis. Knock yourself out. That's a good one. And I also have Chain Dog 2003. You know, this was a really... there were actually two that I talked about that I wrote down for Chain Dog. The first one being the flashy thing from MIB, and the name actually escapes me at the moment, but it's unimportant. We all know we're talking about the flashy thing because Will Smith actually calls it the flashy thing throughout the entire movie. But, you know, the thing that basically you just like flash somebody and then they kind of don't remember anything that just happened, and you kind of tell them what happened, and then they, you know, because we're all gullible idiots, we all believe it, and then, you know, we go on about our lives. It kind of has that, you know, we can go back and kind of fix things mentality, right? So, and several examples were given, and very, very colorful examples as well. I particularly like the example about approaching a young lady at a bar, and you get horribly rejected, and you just flip the switch and convince her that she found you irresistibly charming, and you need to go have a lot of fun together. Fill in the blanks. But you know, I think that's a good one. I think that's definitely a good example of how we could use a good sci-fi gadget to better everyone's life. The other thing Chain Dog talked about, and several of you, I remember Estolia talked about this as well, Predator technology. So the idea that we could have kind of and several of you mentioned a cloaking device, fits right in with that, Predator technology. So the Predator has several awesome gadgets that I think would be really cool to have. The cloaking thing, the missile launcher thing, you know, the laser sight stuff, like that's, I can dig all that stuff. That was really, really cool. So those are the ones that I wrote down for you guys. All great suggestions. There were a few I think I was a little surprised not to see on the list, but I'll cover that in just a moment. But I thought it was a pretty good list. I think if you go back and you look, and I actually ended up doing this, I Googled, you know, whatever, top best 10 gadgets, I don't know, sci-fi geek gadgets or whatever, something with that amalgamation of words. And I think pretty much you guys covered every single one of the top ones that I found. So, excellent work. That just means you guys are really, really good at this. So that's compliments to all of you. I think all of them are viable and all of them are great. So let me get into mine. And I got a little bit of a twist on this week, guys, that I think you're going to like. So let me mention a few that weren't on there. And then I'll tell you what I think my pick is for the best, okay? So the ones that I wrote down were the holodeck, which wasn't put on there. Now I know that I initially kind of intended it to be a handheld device, and the holodeck is not a handheld device. At least it's not before Voyager when the Doctor has the holo emitter, and you guys know that whole story. But so it's not necessarily a portable device. That being said, the holo emitter is pretty amazing. So if not a holodeck, if we're sticking with just gadgets, then I would say that holo emitter from Star Trek Voyager is pretty much the coolest thing ever. A flying car, like Blade Runner, so all the cars that were flying. Whenever I watch that movie, or whenever I watch something like Fifth Element, for example, you know, I always watch the flying cars or whatever, and I thought, man, how the hell would you engineer the traffic patterns on those things? Like, there are certain altitudes, even in Coruscant, in the Star Wars prequels, maybe that's just me, and maybe I'm just weird, but I kept thinking, looking at, like, how the hell do people keep from bumping into each other and flying at the same level? And how do you have a highway when everybody can just go wherever the hell they want? This is why I lead a boring, terrible existence, guys, because I think about these things when I watch these movies rather than just enjoying them. But it's also why I have a website and why all of you are watching right now, because we can complain about these things and get away with it. So, the other one that I was really surprised not to see was the transporter from Star Trek. Now, again, I know it's not a portable device. You don't just bring it around in your pocket and just slide it, and you know you're wherever you want to go. But you know, it's not necessarily a huge device, and you know you have to have somebody that controls it, obviously. But that's probably one of the coolest things I could think of. You know, how many times has it happened to you? You got a group of friends together. You all know that you want to go see a movie. Something happens. Dinner runs late. You're probably not going to make it. Well, problem solved. In fact, as long as there's space available, you can beam right into the movie theater. Hopefully you pay for a ticket in the meantime, you know, like we talked about last week with the whole piracy thing. But anyway, you know, you can just beam right in, no problem, right? So many different applications for the transporter, and I think all of them are good reasons. You know, for every one of these, there could probably be some really evil, devious applications as well. I'm going to avoid those because this is all about positivity. I'm on vacation, damn it. You know, it should be about good stuff. So I'm just going to avoid those. We're going to gloss right over and talk about all the great things that one could do with the technology. Another one that I was really surprised didn't get mentioned, especially because I kind of teed it up, I believe, in the video from last week, which is the tricorder from Star Trek. You know, all the way back from when Spock had his little, like, I don't even remember what that thing was called, but he walked around with that ginormous box, which is so laughable now. But, I know, like, for example, I have a tricorder app on my phone. But again, it does lots of things that are just kind of aesthetic. Like, it beeps. I think that's cool. But beeping is not what a tricorder does best, right? So, like, it can tell me if I'm, you know, like, it has a compass and a gyro and all this kind of, it's got a thermometer, it can, you know, check the weather and all that kind of stuff. And, That's cool. That's useful. But the tricorder could do everything, right? So the tricorder, I mean, I know there are medical tricorders and there are science tricorders and there are probably everything else in the world. But the point is, you could just sit down and check somebody's vital signs. So somebody's got hurt or something like that. You can check to make sure they're okay. And